Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for accepting the call to order. I really appreciate it. Welcome to the third day of this Gallen Symposium. I trust you had a great time at the dinner evenings last night, and that you've come this morning prepared to work. I think it's a fascinating morning. We're going to discuss the issue of management, the challenges for management. We're discussing the nature of the social contract, the effective social contract we have in our democracies going forward. And then we have the Schmidt-Heine conference lecture at 11 o'clock. It's my very great pleasure to welcome the panelists this morning, particularly to welcome the chairman, Andrew Hill. Andrew Hill has done, as far as I can see, almost every conceivable job on the Financial Times. And I did mention to him, seeing that Martin Wolf is chairing the next session, this is almost like a Financial Times morning, Andrew. Andrew's a great authority on management, very up to date in talking all the time to the challenges facing management today. And he has one other, which I think is a mark of great distinction. He's a graduate of the University of Cambridge through no less a college than Trinity College in English. And to be an English graduate of Cambridge is a mark, in my judgment, I say it as a British person, of great distinction. So please, will you welcome Andrew and the panelists.
Thank you very much, Lord Griffiths. Thank you. I like the round of applause before we've done everything. That's always heartening. And thank you for turning out this morning. As Lord Griffiths says, we are going to be involving you this morning. I'm hoping that we're going to leave plenty of time for discussion and questions from the floor on this topic. Our plan this morning is to talk about old and new management and everything in between. We've just got barely an hour to do so. And I think yesterday we heard a lot about the clash of generations from a macroeconomic point of view, from a corporate and strategic point of view. And this is the session where we really get down to discussing, practically speaking, what are businesses doing, what should businesses do, what can businesses do to accommodate the tension, the natural tension between generations, both the younger generation coming through and an older and experienced generation which has reached the top, achieved the mastery that's necessary to be in some of the top roles in business. And we've got a perfect panel to discuss this. I'll just introduce them briefly. Preetha Reddy from Apollo Hospitals, Stefan Sommer from ZF Friedrichshafen, and Raul Gutierrez, who's at Stanford at the moment, but has been working at not just at his own family company, De Acero, but also at Apple for a short period. Both Preetha and Stefan took their first management roles in their early 30s, and Raul in his late 20s. So they have experience of what it's like to go into a business as a manager at a pretty young age, and we'll be drawing that out. So to start off, I'll ask Preetha just to give her insights into the topic, and then we'll hear a little bit from each panelist before we get the discussion underway. Preetha.
Thank you. You know, most institutions come into being because there's a crying need in society, and all of us know that. But unless an institution can adapt to change, it might be really hard for us to go forward. And having said that, I think the value systems are cast in stone. You know, the values of a company never change. But the vision, the way we achieve things have to change with the times. And, you know, yesterday it was natural resources, which was important. Today it's the knowledge resource. It was seniority yesterday, which was, you know, given due respect. But today it's innovation and creativity. So things keep changing, and we're living in a very, very disruptive world. At a click of a button, we have knowledge which is available everywhere. So unless we change, I think it may be hard for people. My generation, according to me, is actually what I call the sandwich generation, because we have, the senior, the entrepreneur, who actually set up the organization, who made it successful, worked 24/7 for the organization to be what it is. And then there's the younger generation, one step younger than us, who come, and they come from business schools. They come from, very good business schools, and they have management theories and philosophies. And, they come and tell us about many things which are going wrong in the organization. So how does the sandwich generation, which is all of us, really match the ideology of the people, the entrepreneur, the pioneer who really set the organization, grew it to the kind of level which it is, and then match the ideology, the speed, the philosophy, the adaptation of technology, which the generation just below us has. So I think it's very important for our generation, which is actually the middle generation, to be able to play a mentoring role, to be able to play a supportive role, and really see how do we match the ideology of both. And I think that's really what success is all about. Prosperity in a business will be there. Prosperity in a business has to stay. But unless there's a little bit of disruption, unless we're able to really shake off the old ideology, I think we won't be able to flourish. Sometimes when there's like a huge tree growing, nothing grows below it. And when you're gardening, you really cut off some of the branches to let the sunlight in. Similarly, I think some of the old ideologies have to be changed and replaced for the new ones. But we have to do it gently. We have to do it with maturity, because at the end, it's the end game which is important. It's the prosperity of the organization. It's the ethos of the organization. It's the value system of the organization which can't change. So I think it's our generation has to play a tougher role than either the pioneering generation or the one who's really taking over from us. And I think that's where I come from.
Thank you very much, Preetha. A perfect metaphor with which to begin the day, with the tree with the branches overshadowing the seedlings. Stefan, how do you deal with the generational change at ZF?
Yeah, first of all, I don't think that there is really a clash of generations. This is nothing which happens from one day to another. It's a continuous process. And a new generation is more or less created by the values of today, and it's much influenced by the technology abilities which we create today. And this is what we are seeing by the young generation coming now to the industrial, to the economical life. They are growing up in a technical world with really unlimited communication, speed in communication. They have grown up in a different world of values. Like me, I count myself as a baby boomer. We are growing up with a more or less technical orientation. So with the technical values we had in our former generations, those values now are commodities. These are not the values of the upcoming generations. So it's a continuous process, and I think this is very good, because the values of the new generations really ideally reflect what is the need of a company to be successful in economical and business life. And this is the big challenge we have in our companies, to have this continuous integration of new generations, to be continuously successful in a global economy. And just to walk through the almost 3 generations we have in a company. It's the old generation, which is not really fitting in the need of the business life of today. It's the new generation, or the current generation, having really control in the companies, the mid-age generation, and then opening up the path and just pulling the new generation with the new values, which really are the success for the company in the future, to pull them into the organization, into the company, and bring them in the management path, or even in some competence passes. So this is a continuous changing process which integrates new generations, and not a clash.
So, Raul, you're seeing this from the point of view of the new generation, the third group that Stefan identified. How do you see these challenges being resolved? Because they are challenges. It's not all harmonious change, even if it's not a clash, an overt clash.
Yeah, I agree. First of all, you have to excuse my manners. I'm eating this candy because, not because I'm Generation Y, but because I have a little bit of a cough, and it's actually a Ricola, so it's a Swiss candy. So, yes, I think that over the last years, Generation Y has become more active in the business environment, and we have started to invade the workplace. We are asking for more flexible hours, more meritocracy, responsibility early on, and even more pay. And many of us have grown up feeling empowered by technology and constant praising from our older generations, and we have had our needs met in one way or another. So we have started to concentrate on higher needs, such as doing good for the environment or finding our passion or being inclusive in society. But this also has two sides of a coin. On one part, we are game changers and innovators, but on the other part, we can sometimes become too full of ourselves and forget that experience and relying on mentors has also some good value to it. In my company, the Acero, a steel manufacturing company, I used to work in a place where most people were older than me, and it worked for me. One of my first bosses was the person that had most experience and more years in the plant. I sometimes grew very impatient with him because he kept asking for more reports and more reports and more meetings, and I was very impatient. So I went off and just did what I thought was right by myself and generated results. And this worked well for some time, but I went back to him, and he was not happy. So we sat down, and we agreed that we would sit down at least once a week, no reports. I would tell him what I was doing, and in exchange, he would give me some of his experience on what worked in the past. So it's actually worked really well, and we could extrapolate it to other teams in the plant. So, I mean, in the last decade, we've seen a surge of adoption technologies from social networks to online system collaboration tools, big data analytics, etc. And Generation X and Generation Y in the workplace has changed the rules of the game. Companies like Google, for example, or Snapchat, or Apple, who have very flexible hours, maybe I have gone to too much of an extreme, I think. But I think we need to find a midpoint. There's an example of a company I met the CEO of called Qualtrics. It's a data analytics company, and they were funded recently by Sequoia Capital. And the CEO, Ryan Smith, said that he had an only inside sales team, only sales by phone. And he started doing this in small deals only. And as he wanted to go to bigger deals of sales, he thought he might have to go to the traditional sales model and bring outside salespeople. But he said, I'll stay with inside sales. And to his surprise, this worked very well all the way through to bigger deals, to $1 million deals, not ever seeing the customer, but only speaking on the phone. So I say this because there's good things that we can learn from experience, but there's also a change in not only in the workforce, but only in consumers. So things have to change. And just to finish, I think that we need to have the best from each generation. I mean, we are all here in this symposium because we want to understand each other better. We want to work together in a better way. So I think the best way to do this is not to point fingers at each other and say, hey, you don't understand me and you're wrong, or you have to do this for me. I think we need to be proactive and go and search for mentors that can give us advice and that can also better understand us by having better communication and tighter knits.
Thank you, Raul. Wonderful insights. I mean, you've hit on one extremely practical point at which the generational tension applies, particularly to those who are rising to be leaders in companies at young ages. And I just wanted to get Stefan and Preetha's insights into this question of, you're in the room managing for the first time a team of mostly people who are more experienced than you are. Preetha, what sort of practical advice do you have for people who are in that situation? A lot of people in the room will have been in that situation.
I think the
Others
art
will
of
be.
listening becomes very important. You know, I had this terrible experience when I first walked into the hospital. It was 1 week down the road, and I walked into a doctor's office and questioned him about something about reporting and timing, and he put in his papers the next day, and that was a shock.
So he resigned? He resigned?
He resigned.
Yeah.
He said, you know, who is this? I was 30, he was in his 60s. You know, she's half my age, and she came and questioned me about something. And then I realized that, you know, you don't really, especially when you're dealing with people who are fantastic in the work they do, who are so experienced, it really makes sense to let them talk, you know, have the art of listening, and then maybe come forth with an idea, because we have this radical shift where we're saying, you know, I come from a healthcare company and I've worked in that all my life. And today we're saying that we don't want people to come into the hospitals. So, you know, we don't want the hospitals crowded, and can we take the point of care to people's homes? Number one is it costs them 1/10 of what it would to come into a hospital, and then the sheer convenience of it. So the first time we even spoke about it, the management team was like, you know, but then how do we show volumes and how do we show the numbers? But then it's the customer is important. So, you know, how do we show convenience? And once this program really happened, the volumes for, you know, the high-end work, the value which was created was so much, and the data which was available was so much that people realized. So I think you have to be able to, number one, be convincing, and number two, really be able to listen to what the older generation has. I think I learned the hard way, you know, a couple of bad experiences, but now I know. And I think this lesson would go to the next generation, because every year we recruit people who are early 20s, you know, between 25 and 26, just to tell us where we're going wrong, you know, just to say how disruptive can the organization be. It's not necessary that everything they say will work, but definitely if we had an open mind, there may be some brilliant ideas which would change the way with what we're doing. But I think to go and convince or explain to the older generation, you can't really walk into someone's room and say, listen, this is the way forward. You have to say that, you know, this idea has come up, but what do you think about it? And it takes a little while.
So do you have a forum? Do you have a forum for these 25 and 26-year-olds to pass on their ideas up the chain?
Actually, it's a very well-set practice. There's an advisory committee in every hospital which has people who've been there a long time and who've achieved really well. And then this group of youngsters always presents to them.
Right.
So, you know, then there's a sense of shared goals, there's a sense of involvement, because I think if people are working at a parallel, there's no meeting point, and ideas don't succeed. There may be 100 different new brilliant ideas, but unless they're working together as a team, it doesn't succeed.
That's interesting. Phil Clark, the chief executive of Tesco, the British supermarket chain, he talks about having a 20-something employee in his office to remind him of things that might apply to the younger generation as consumers and as managers. I like to think of it a bit like the modern equivalent of the Renaissance scholar having a skull on the desk to remind him of mortality. This is like the person who is there to remind you of creativity and innovation. Stefan, do you have anything similar to tap the advice of the younger generation within ZF? How does that work? Is there a formal system or an informal system?
Yes, it's not a really formal system. We are looking for having continuously including the young generations in our organization in decision-making processes. And this is, I think there is no one-size-fits-all recipe. So what's working for Apple or Google is not really working necessarily for ZF as a company doing B2B business with heavy industry goods. And you need to find the right way for your company. You need to find the right mix for your company, not to lose the knowledge generation, which is the elder generation, who is really understanding your business model, but then just pulling into the company the new sides, the new values. And what is very important is to listen to those new generations, to include them into the top-level business processes, as well as creating a feedback culture in the company. And I think this is for the most companies which are driven by the elder generations the biggest problem, because the new generations is a kind of feedback generation. They like the like button in their social networks, but the elder generation is not used to the like button. And if I'm looking into traditional companies, sometimes we say no grumble is enough praise, but this is not how the young generation is working. And to create this feedback culture and to build up a communication to the young generation, to see what are their needs, what are their values, what are their ideas to further develop on. We need to find those skip-level communications also from top level. And this is what I'm really putting priority in our company, is skip-level communication, because too much companies, especially in industrial life, are too much stick and in their rigid organizations. They are not.
You mean, what do you mean by skip level? You mean
skip level means top level from my position, CEO, down to the younger generations, which are usually in the lower hierarchy levels.
So not just passing down a message.
Yes,
via
not
the
going
hierarchy.
through the rigid hierarchy.
Right.
So I will never get face-to-face feedback from the young people. But this is very important, to have this feedback culture, to have direct communication, to see what is the ideals of the incoming generations, and then just to evaluate what is the potential, how can I use them, not to shock the old generation, but smoothly integrate the young generation and then use their values, use their competencies exactly where you can use it in your global business.
And have you encountered resistance from the levels in between that used to be included in a chain of communication when you want to go and talk directly to the lower or newer levels?
Yeah, for sure. You have almost, I think it's the one-third rule. 1/3 of your organization is not understanding why you bypass him and talk with his employee. 1/3 is just looking what is the result of this communication process, and if it is good, then they will adopt to that. And of course, 1/3 in the company is really saying, yes, now we are going the right way. And so this is the big challenge, just to show the old generation that this is the right way, and to convince them that they can also pull some values and some contributions out of that.
Right. Raul, you talked to me before the session about the importance of feedback. Is that something that you think is lacking? It's definitely something that the younger generation surveys have shown really wants from its senior managers.
I think that's true. I think I completely agree with my panelists here. I think that feedback is very important. And I think two-way feedback is very important, because we generally see feedback as one way. I think we generally see it from older to younger, but younger to older is also important. And to your question about how do we get the ideas from the younger generations, I think it's good to be open to feedback. For example, at Stanford University, there's a very, very high culture of feedback. We get feedback for everything. And sometimes it's too much, but what they do is that they are always changing. They're always changing the program, always changing the classes. Professors are always changing to newer generations coming in. And I want to apply that when I go back to work in my family company, because it's very easy to adapt to change when you're constantly open to communication. So I think that's true.
Your family company, you're the third generation.
That's correct.
Now, clearly, family companies are where the clash of generations in its purest form takes place. And Preetha, you've probably got some experience as well, because your father founded the Apollo hospitals. Raul, what is the experience that you've had in dealing with that particular pure clash of family versus different generations in the family?
Yeah, it's a very good question. For example, we have had several differences in opinions and thoughts. For example, when I was working in the company, I worked there for 4 years as a plant director. I wanted to go to pursue an MBA, because I wanted to learn from others and other companies and have other ideas. And they were completely against it. They said, no, what we did when we were younger is that we learned here in the company and we only worked here, and we had this apprenticeship model where we learned from our father, and we've been very successful. Why do you want to go, right? And in the end, they said, well, you know, if you go, might make you a better person, but it won't make you a better professional. So we were thinking very differently. But so I decided to go, and I think I've opened my mind a lot, learned a lot, and now they're starting to see how this decision made sense, how my willingness to go out and work at Apple and go to Stanford, and how that has opened my mind to new ideas, and I will bring back those to the family business. So there's things like that in between generations that little by little you have to convince the older generations, not through words, through results. And I think that's sometimes the numbers speak louder than the words. So,
Preetha, what's your experience of the family tension?
Well, I have to say this. I think the men in the audience might just shoot me for this. But my father has 4 daughters. And when we started off, it was because the girls didn't want to see our father working so hard. So for the first few years at work, we just listened to everything he said. So it made it really easy. And, you know, we worked 24/7. We were not paid salaries. We were cheap labor. So it was fun. It was fun at work. So we did that. But I think today there's a sense of respect because he's 80, but he's a very active chairman. And we go to him with, you know, these are the plans. This is what we want to grow. And I find that, you know, Dr. Reddy at 80 is 20 steps ahead of us. So there's always a sense of respect that, you know, and it's mutual. He knows that, you know, if he has a vision and he has an ideology, he's got a team of workers who will just willingly do it for him. So I think that is one point for success. And the second thing is that to be able to understand that even though he's an 80-year-old, a pioneer, you know, first generation, he really is thinking 20 steps ahead of all of us. You know, we have to respect that in him. But the best part is that now there's the 3rd generation who he really gives a lot of time to, surprisingly, because, you know, with us, it's like, you know, is all this done? And what do you think? Can we do it quicker, faster, better? But with the next generation, it's, you know, how do we really change completely the way we are doing things? So when it was, you know, investing in robotics, which was expensive, it was like 6 of them. And that's because the 3rd generation said, listen, you know, we owe it to people to invest in this, and we owe it to people to do something better than what we're doing. And it was like an instant decision. So I think it's a very participative, very collaborative, and with mutual respect for each other. And that's why I think so far, you know, working in a family business has been successful. But the good thing about it is that the organization is seeing this. You know, they're seeing that there's synergy in the way each other functions. They're seeing that, you know, there's mutual respect. And the fact is that at 80, Dr. Reddy is still a very active chairman, and there's enough work and enough room for everyone. So I think it's been a great lesson in the way family businesses are run.
So and he's not a tree in whose shadow nobody can grow.
No, exactly. You know, he's like planted many trees now.
Right.
So,
Good point.
It's a great learning.
I'm going to open to the audience in a second, but just want to ask Stefan, partly following on from that point, you talked about how the 3 generations in your business need to bring up the younger generation or the generation below them. How practically does that happen at ZF? Because your generation, what you described as the current generation, has obviously got to accept that it is eventually going to be in the redundant older generation to a certain degree. And that's a difficult transition to make, a tense moment when you realize you're no longer the current generation, you're the old and possibly outmoded generation.
To speak technically, we have a clear process behind that. And the process is, of course, first of all, we need to have a brand image of our company. So we need to attract the attention of the young people, students, as well as even people for shop floor. to have a strong wish to work with our company. We want the best overall, so we need to create a company brand which makes the professional life within our company attractive. Then, of course, we need to have the communication link to universities, but to all kind of, let's say, education systems all around the world. This is a big challenge. And then bring those young people into the company, and then we have, of course, trainee programs, apprentice programs. And again, I would like to have then a kind of what I call skip level. That means top level leaders. They need to communicate with those people, listen to them, which gives the opportunity to those people to clearly say what is their value, what is their idea of working life, what is their idea of bringing the company up front, and as well as learning also from the elder generation. But this is the big difference from my point of view. It's not only the generations which are changing, it's our business life which is changing.
Right.
So coming from maybe one product, one business idea, a global company like ZF now has a complexity in a product portfolio, in a technical portfolio, in the global portfolio, which cannot be driven by one entrepreneur on the top. So if you want to change something in a company like this, you are a leader, and then you need to communicate. You need to see that everybody really understands what is the major direction in the company. You always, if you are a leader, you are stepping ahead, but you are dependent on that everybody's following you. So you need to adjust your speed of change and stepping ahead to what the whole global organization can make up to follow you. And this needs communication. You need sometimes to look around if everybody is really able to follow you. And this is, again, communication. This is communication across all hierarchy levels and pulling the new generations in the companies, because they are pushing from the very back end. And as a leader, you are pulling in the front, and then, of course...
I suppose I'm wondering, it's all very well communicating to the new generation that they can step up to be leaders. How do you communicate to the older generation that their time as leader is over?
Sometimes it's a very hard process. Most times, and the easiest way is that they really recognize. And you have also, in a big company, you have not a black and white world. You do not have only the world which is fits to the young leaders. You also have some jobs which are really, the success model is experience, is a special kind of knowledge which you accumulated due decades in your working life. And the result then is just that you just sort those, bringing them on an expert path, that you change job descriptions and responsibilities to take benefit from experience on the one side, and even the older generations, they feel well in this area because that they want to use those experience, this knowledge which they have collected. And then you need to create room for the new generations just to try out their ideas. And so in a big company, you have always the chance to give everybody his own, nearly everybody his home to realize his experience and need of change.
Right. My piece of advice would be never start the conversation with you remember I told you about that tree with the old branches? You're one of the old branches. That's not the approach. Now, let me open this up to the audience. I'm hoping that we're going to get some provocative questions, because there's lots and lots of issues here that we can tap into. There are microphones. I'm going to go over to the left here, because I know that the wings get sometimes missed out on these sessions. Could you say who you are and who you represent, if you have an affiliation?
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm so excited to listen to all. Because I'm also a third generation for manufacturing business in Japan. My name is Yasuo Iwako, and I want to ask Mr. Sommer, CEO from ZF, sorry, because you said this new generation has feedback generation, and sometimes new values can be obtained from them in your company. But I think for manufacturing business, learning from the knowledge generation is very important, because otherwise they don't know how to be creative. So my question is, do you have any specific method to manage this balance between learning from the knowledge generation and be creative? Or in the opposite, maybe do you have anything to stimulate this young generation to be more creative?
Yeah, maybe you've talked a bit about the communication. Maybe you can talk about mechanisms that might exist that you may have changed possibly recently to accommodate that creativity.
Yeah, it's very difficult just to have a one-size-fits-all process to guarantee that. And it's not only the industry who is very sensible. Manufacturing industry, I totally agree, very much relies on the knowledge, which is very much in the head of the elder generation. And then you need to bring them together with the younger generations. And very important is that they communicate, that they talk, and that they skip their hierarchically gap in between. And it's not only manufacturing versus maybe IT world, especially if you're looking through the Japanese eyes, yeah, you have an intercultural world. Feedback culture in Japan is very difficult. Yeah, if an employer is just giving feedback to his superior, it's different thing, like in the US or like in Europe, and you need to respect that, and you need to adjust the speed, intercultural, due to the business, and of course due to the generation and the people you have in there. We have an overall process which encourage feedback, which encourage frequent communication, and then of course it's very much on the experience. You need the right people in the right region, in the right area of your business, whether it's pure manufacturing, whether it's communication, whether it's IT department. So we have not a one-size-fits-all organization. You need to have the right people in there using the overall process at a total and then applying it in the right way in their specific fields.
Okay, you make a good point about the cultural differences. We were talking beforehand about the generations not being homogeneous. Obviously, there are cultural differences by nationality, by cultural upbringing, and so on. There was a question over here on the, yes, about 4 rows back. Lady, I think, of 4 rows back there.
Hi, thank you. My question actually is about the notion of reverse mentoring.
Could you give your name and...
Sure. My name is Anisha. I'm from India. I'm one of the leaders of tomorrow. Yeah, so I just wanted to discuss the notion of reverse mentoring, which for those of you here not familiar with the concept is literally having younger people in the organization pass on things that they know better than the older generation back to them. And obviously, technology is something that comes immediately to mind as something with respect to social media or with respect to how to use technology in processes better as something younger generation folks can pass on to the older generation. Because this session is interactive, I was actually wondering if you could just do a straw poll to see how many of the leaders of today here have honestly and openly in the past ever seeked reverse mentoring from younger people in their organization. Okay,
so this is going to be, I consider myself reverse mentored to do a little bit of straw polling. And this is a question for leaders of today, or let's say anybody of sort of late 40s and above in the audience. Have you sought out reverse mentoring from the younger people in your organizations? A show of hands on those who have sought it out.
Can we do that too?
And yes, you can. Obviously, hands up here as well. And anybody who is not sorted out and will now go away from this session and do so. Nobody's admitting to that. So we have a few on this reverse mentoring point. I mean, Raul. Family organization can be quite hierarchical. You're in a manufacturing business that has pretty strict delineations of who does what. Is reverse mentoring practical within that type of organization?
I think it's very practical. I think one of the things, for example, that we did in the plant was that our system of production, the manufacturing plant, was an inverse pyramid, where we had the top of the pyramid to be the bottom of the pyramid before. So the younger people and the operators and the people in the bottom who knew a lot and who were also agents of change were the ones that we put them at the top, because they gave us a lot of the ideas. Me and the other older steering committee members, they gave a lot of the ideas that we could bring in, or they could bring into to action, right? So I think it's very, very applicable to manufacturing as well.
Right. Okay, another question from the floor. I can see one at the back, lady further back from the last questioner with the glasses on.
Hello, my name is Christine Knaps. I'm a doctor and I've worked in hospitals, and I've noticed a great hierarchy in Germany especially, so we didn't have to say anything as small doctors, and were the higher ones that had everything. So my interest lies in human resources and how to develop them in the firms, because I find the difference between the young generation and us is that we had a different socialization concerning our careers. We maybe might stick to the same firm for all our life, our working life, compared to the young generation, who are much more flexible, and they're also more flexible because of their young age. So I find that's the crisis in some firms, that it's concerning, the main issue is flexibility, and developing the human, the personality development in those firms of the old persons and of the younger ones, to have more patience with the elder ones. So what are you personally doing, the three of you, in your firms for personality development, human resources development?
So this is a question about developing human resources at a time when the younger generation is more mobile and likely to look, not likely to look for a whole career in one firm. Is that your point?
No, my question is how you can promote the personal development of each of your employees to have a better climate, and just to make everybody more flexible, the elder ones and the younger ones.
Right, okay.
Those different topics that you're working with.
Sure. Preetha, as this question came from the healthcare sector, I'm also just interested, it reminded me that there's a question about expertise in your sector particularly. If I want to go in for surgery at a hospital, I really don't want a creative, innovative, young, inexperienced surgeon opening me up. So there is a built-in, in some businesses there's a built-in hierarchy, isn't there?
Yes. To answer that, I think the built-in hierarchy is there. It has to be respected. Nobody would want to go to a young, inexperienced surgeon. But having said that, the young surgeon also has to learn his ropes. So I think the mentorship becomes very important in a hospital hierarchy, that, you know, they train surgeons, like, you know, typically teaching institutions like all of us would systematically train people, which then, you know, are placed in different setups. But sometimes they're, you know, they're disruptive methodologies, you know, minimally invasive, lasers, robotics. It sometimes sounds like science fiction. And while it would have the blessings of the senior surgeons, they probably wouldn't, you know, then go ahead and do that. So then the younger surgeons still work with them, and you know, just do this kind of work. But on a human resource development aspect, attrition definitely happens. And, you know, in today's scenario, we see the younger generation really looking for opportunities everywhere. About 20, 25 years ago, traditionally, if they were happy in an organization, they wouldn't even look to go somewhere else. But today, people are looking at opportunities simply because they want to try it out. And so we have to encourage them to really be happy in the workplace. And the many initiatives, you know, I always find that we have to expand this sphere of activity. You know, if they're doing the same thing day in and day out, and they're not challenged to do more, then they start looking elsewhere. So there has to be a constant atmosphere of innovation, creativity, challenge, so that then they work longer hours also, and not because we tell them they have to work, but because they enjoy working. So I think the working atmosphere has to be so charged and so challenged that, that people really find that, this is an organization which is really thinking into the future. There's scope for me. And not only I stay in the organization, but I'd like my children to come and work here. We have a lot of staff whose children now have become doctors, and they've joined us. So I think you have to create that atmosphere of innovation, of challenge, of a sense of freshness, and then you find that people really like to stay within the organization.
So in a sense, you have to make the organization be flexible in order to encourage the flexibility.
I think we have to change with the times,
right.
Because otherwise, we can just tend to be very dull and stodgy, and especially in healthcare, what really made sense 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, is not relevant today.
Right.
Some, people would come in for a spine surgery and stay in a hospital for a week, but today they come home in the morning and they go off in the evening. So things are changing,
right.
And we have to change with
Stefan, you had
times.
some thoughts on this,
yes.
flexibility.
First of all, I can only recommend, please separate management hierarchies from expert knowledge.
Right.
Yeah, if you mix this up, you are on the wrong path. Because if you have good surgeons, they are not necessarily a good manager of a hospital, for sure. I'm not a specialist in that, but I can
agree.
the same in now. So this is very, very important if you talk about development of the people. Separate this, open up different career paths, those for experts to keep the knowledge, and those for having management skills. And then you need, again, this feedback culture to open up those hierarchies. That you have something like a 330-degree feedback culture, which really sees that it's not only the hierarchy who's making the decisions. It's just something that you can really see how I'm seeing in the organization. Is the organization supporting me? Are my peers supporting me? And again, this needs to be lived down from the very top. That's very important. If you have a top-level management team who is not really convinced to do that, who is not doing it on their own, 330, the feedback culture, then of course you cannot expect that the organization will adopt this.
Right.
So live that from the top, and do not mix expert knowledge with management skills. This is, I think, the biggest mistake you can do.
Excellent point. Raul, briefly on this one?
Yeah, so I've seen several companies, one of them a local company from where I'm from, Monterrey, Mexico, called Alpha. It's a holding company that is pioneering shale gas, and Amazon is another example. They have, you talked about flexibility and development. They have these programs where you go in, and they're called leadership rotational development programs. So what they do is you go in and you go into different areas of the organization as a young leader, and you have very important responsibilities and clear projects, and you also have a mentor that can train you, that will train you and develop you, and you have exposure to the top management, which is also really important to young generations. And you have this test period where they watch you and they measure you based on results. And after this, you have seen a lot of the company, you have flexibility, and you can place yourselves in different parts of the company. But what I think is important here is that after you finish this program, you keep your mentor, and you also have the possibility to keep changing around in the company. So I think there are ways to keep this flexibility and this development in the companies of today.
You had experience for 6 months in Stanford of working with Apple, didn't you, in the supply chain operation there. What did that teach you about flexibility? Because they offer a lot of autonomy and flexibility to staff, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, they have also a mentorship program. They assigned me a mentor. I had clear goals and responsibilities, where I will be measured from. And I mean, Apple is a very unique culture, and it's a very big company with very specific tasks. So I wouldn't say it's the most flexible one, but they do have a lot of innovative ideas, like you can work from home, and you have mentorship and two-way feedback and all that that I think is important for our generation.
Right. Okay. Yes, on the second row here, lady just here. Sorry, the microphones have gone away. And then this gentleman at the front being very patient after I ignored him.
Hi, my name is Joyce Meng from New York City. My question poses a hypothetical situation. Let's say your customers are from an older generation with a more traditional view on specific things. For example, women in leadership roles, such as female doctors, or distrust of young managers, or a favored view of explicit hierarchy. Do you think it's a sound business strategy to cater to this, or do you think there's a fiduciary obligation of your organization to help shape their views on issues such as diversity, inclusion, and innovation? Thanks.
Okay, so Preetha, would we force a young doctor onto somebody who distrusted young doctors, or indeed a young manager? This is a customer relationship question, possibly more than an internal management question.
I think the expertise really is what matters. You might have a young doctor who's very good at what they do, and the customer shouldn't be denied that expertise. And the reverse is also right, that sometimes you need maturity. Typically, I'm seeing this happen that, even though you said that an older surgeon may be more experienced, sometimes the younger surgeons are technically just so good. While a physician needs the maturity of being able to deal with the customer, see the nuances of how the history and how the human body works. So I think the customer has to be the core of our existence. And it's very hard to say that one size fits all. And it has to be that the customer's expectations have to be matched with expertise. So we can't really say that this is the formula or the answer for it.
Right. Gentleman at the front here. And then this lady in white.
Thank you. I'm a grandfather to 7 grandchildren, 6 of them university graduates. I never recommended anything to them. I never suggested what they should do. I just kept asking them questions. I think, by the way, this is one of the ways of avoiding clash of generations. Don't tell them, ask them questions. What do you want to study? Where do you want to study? Why that? What do you think of? At any rate, but the question is to Mrs. Reddy. I didn't quite understand why you said that us men in the audience may want to shoot you when you immediately after said that you treat your 80-year-old father with tremendous respect because he's 20 steps ahead of you. So why would we want to shoot you when you show to us men such great respect? Thank you.
I love that. I said that because, if there were sons, sometimes the sons just don't do or die. While when the father is working, I find that the daughters just, I have 2 sons, I don't have a daughter. So that's why I said that my father had these 4 devoted slaves, and we did exactly what, so it helped grow the organization. And he came back from the US, a cardiologist, and he couldn't even afford a secretary. He had like a part-time secretary. So we would go to work on weekends and on holidays simply because we felt, Dad is working so hard. And the same attitude is there even today. And sometimes we don't even agree with what he thinks, but we would never just say, we'd probably just say, Dad, can we do this better? And having said that, my father has 10 grandchildren, and he deals with them so much better than we do. Because he questions them, and he says, maybe this is a better way to do it, while we would probably say, hey, listen, go ahead and do that. So I think grandparents play a great role in mentoring and help shaping the future generation.
I think we should explore the link between longevity and having devoted slaves in a later session.
I think so.
The lady in the white jacket here on the second row.
Thank you very much. My name is Yoko Ishikura, professor from Tokyo. My question is as follows. How do you make sure that each generation, older and younger, or top management or younger at the interface, be aware of the difference in assumptions or expectations. The reason why I say that is I moderated the panel yesterday about the expectations of work life between millennials and baby boomers. And we sort of talked about it, and communication is important and so forth. And yet, as you mentioned, that the business has changed so much. And it's not necessarily related to generations. I mean, it's just as different. And so the assumptions and expectations are different. And young people want to move around. And yet, it's very difficult for the older generation to understand that, or even be aware that there is a difference. And it's a difference and nothing more. So if you have any experiences of, how to go about that, I would really appreciate. Do you think this goes
beyond what we've already discussed, which is discussion and communication and feedback?
Yeah,
That's
well,
obviously
discussion,
one way.
communication sounds great, but what exactly would you do?
Right. Yes. Okay. Raul, do you want to start? Just take that one. What's the, how do you make, other than past the discussion point?
Yep.
How do you increase the awareness? Is there another way? Are there other ways that you can think of or use?
I think it's a tough one. I think again, communication is clearly one of them. But I think if you formalize the mentorship program, as I mentioned in these companies, and have a two-way mentorship and two-way feedback mechanisms that are formalized in the company, then maybe you can make this communication more efficient. Because I still think that communication is the way to go. I think that's how you clear up things, by being open and transparent.
Right. We'll just get one more question, I think, before the end of the session, if there's somebody who has one. Yes, a hand raised very high at the back there.
Hi, my name is Alba. I'm from Colombia. And I had a question regarding the interaction. If you can just discuss about the interaction between gender equality, the fight for gender equality, and this idea of clash of generations, maybe within your companies. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's pretty broad. Preetha, do you want to set off on that one? Is there, are these the similar problems? I was at a session yesterday where quotas for young people and quotas for gender were equated. I'm not sure there is an equation, but what do you think?
I said it earlier, but I think if Dr. Reddy had a son, he might have taken on, it's traditionally the son takes it on. But in the next generation, I'm seeing that, in our family, there's 7 grandsons and there are 3 granddaughters. But I see the granddaughters working with a healthcare company. I don't know why, but I see that there's a marked change in Asia about gender equality. That whoever's well qualified, whoever is capable, the gender doesn't really matter. And I'm seeing that shift happening in Asia because traditionally people think that Asia is probably a more a traditional society, and it has to be the men who take over. But there's a huge shift. So the gender equality has already come.
Yes.
And I think it won't even be a point for discussion 5-10 years from today.
Good. Stefan, quick one.
Yes, I don't like really the discussion about gender balance, because we are looking at our company, what do we really want? We want to combine professional life with family life, and we want to open up a professional career for everybody, doesn't matter which gender. And this is the big challenge, to open up career paths, to open up the organization, to allow that we can combine family life with professional life, that we are as flexible concerning working hours, home work, and as well like working 24/7, something like this. But this is very easy in the requirements of the global business world. Just adjusting professional careers and organizations, you can create a common way through professional and family life. And if you have realized this, then you immediately have gender balance in the company. That's our understanding about that.
I'm going to have to wind up now because we're cutting into your break. But Preetha, you had something you wanted to say just to conclude.
Yeah, just because there are lots of students in the gathering, I kind of took this down, so I thought I'd read it out with your permission. and this is the way it goes. It says, yesterday natural resources defined power. Today, knowledge defines power. Yesterday, hierarchy was the model, and today, synergy is the mandate. Yesterday, leaders commanded and controlled, and today they empower and coach. Yesterday, shareholders came first, but today, customers come first. Yesterday, employees took orders, but today, teams decide. Yesterday, seniority signified status. Today, innovation and creativity drive status. Yesterday, value was extra, and today, value is everything. So thank you all for allowing me to read this out to you, but I think it kind of encapsulated everything which we kind of spoke about today.
Perfect finish. Thank you, and thank you to the panel.